"Excuse me, sir, your charming mask surely belongs among economy's crowd, not first-class refinement." Derek, a thin male flight attendant with a fake smile, cooed across the first-class cabin of a London-bound flight, his words sharp but wrapped in a sugary tone. The sneaky insult, hiding its cruelty, hit Jason Statham like a quiet slap as he sat by a window, his face covered by a plain black privacy mask and a worn baseball cap tilted low. Statham, dressed in a faded gray hoodie, looked like any regular guy among the cabin's fancy suits and shiny jewelry. His mask and cap were his shield, keeping his famous face hidden so he could avoid attention. He settled into his seat, eyes watching carefully, wanting to stay unnoticed. But Derek's mean jab, sparked by a tough shift, marked him as an outsider, making every passenger turn and stare. Statham spoke softly, trying to stay calm. "Keeping to myself," he said, his voice low through the mask, hoping to stop the trouble. But Derek, thinking he was weak, got closer, his smile cruel. "Oh dear sir, that scruffy mask and cap don't fit first class. Coach is your place," he mocked, his voice loud and snarky, like Statham's plain look was a crime in the fancy cabin. Laughs broke out, a businessman in a sharp suit sneering, "Economy's waiting, buddy." His words started more chuckles. A woman with a sparkly bracelet added, her tone nasty but polite, "Please, that awful mask and cap are spoiling our trip." The crowd's mean comments grew, each one a jab at Statham's hidden face, their fun fueled by Derek's clever rudeness. "Show your face or get out," Derek sang, waving his hand like a showman, his fake kindness stinging like a whip. Statham sat still, but his jaw tightened a bit, showing the hurt of their words, though he stayed quiet to protect his secret. The crowd's laughter got louder, covering a soft buzz from the intercom, the captain's voice lost in their mean jokes. The fancy cabin felt heavy with their rudeness, a fight brewing as Statham's true self waited under the mask and cap, ready to flip their cruel judgment. Before we proceed, like and subscribe to catch Jason Statham's epic face-off with Rude Flight Attendant and comment where you're watching from today. Jason Statham was bone-tired of fame's relentless spotlight, the constant swarm of fans begging for selfies, the whispers trailing him like shadows. On this London-bound flight, he craved the kind of quiet only anonymity could offer. To slip through unnoticed, he donned a plain black privacy mask, its dark fabric cloaking his chiseled features, and tugged a battered baseball cap low over his piercing eyes. A faded gray hoodie, loose and unremarkable, completed the disguise, stripping the action star down to a nobody's silhouette. Slouched in his first-class seat, he scanned the cabin with a predator's focus, his mind a steady drumbeat. Stay low, keep it cool. All he wanted was to glide through this flight unbothered, a ghost escaping the chaos of his Hollywood life. The first-class cabin was a glittering bubble of wealth, a world apart from the cramped seats in coach. Plush leather seats gleamed under soft lights, and the air carried the sharp tang of fresh coffee and pricey cologne, no trace of anything forbidden. Elite passengers filled the space, businessmen in razor-sharp suits, women flashing jewelry that screamed money, their voices loud with boasts of deals sealed and exotic trips planned. But beneath the polish, a nasty edge simmered, a silent contest of who belonged more. They sized each other up with smug glances, their exclusivity a badge they wore like armor. Statham's mask, cap, and hoodie were a smudge on their perfect canvas, rendering him invisible yet somehow offensive, a glitch in their curated world, exactly as he'd planned. Derek, the flight attendant, was a live wire, his nerves frayed to breaking by a grueling shift of fetching snacks and soothing rich folks' petty gripes. His fake smile, plastered on like cheap paint, was cracking, his eyes darting with barely concealed irritation. Statham's mask and cap caught his attention like a red flag, an affront to the cabin's pristine order. "No weirdos messing up my cabin," he muttered under his breath, scrubbing a tray with a scowl, his hands twitching with pent-up frustration. To Derek, the masked guy wasn't just out of place. He was a problem, a lowlife who'd somehow bluffed his way into first class, disrespecting the elite crowd he was paid to pamper. His stress latched onto Statham's plain look, fueling a snap judgment that the guy didn't belong. The passengers, puffed up with their own importance, picked up Derek's vibe like sharks smelling blood. They zeroed in on Statham's scruffy outfit, their whispers sharp and cutting. "Who's this guy in that ratty cap and mask?" A businessman in a silk tie hissed, his lip curling as if Statham's presence was a personal insult. "Looks like he wandered in from a street corner," a woman with dangly diamond earrings sneered, her voice low but vicious, her eyes raking over his hoodie with disgust. Another man, his watch glinting, leaned toward his seatmate, muttering, "Bet he's some nobody who got a ticket by mistake." Their words were a quiet blade, slicing through the cabin's hum, each one a jab at Statham's average appearance, their arrogance stoked by the idea that he didn't measure up to their first-class standards. Statham felt the weight of their stares, his fingers grazing the edge of his cap as he kept his breathing steady. "Ride it out," he thought, his mind a fortress against the growing scorn. The mask and cap were his armor, hiding the face that could turn this cabin upside down in a heartbeat, but he wasn't ready to show it. He knew one slip could blow his cover, exposing him to the very attention he'd worked so hard to avoid. The cabin's mean whispers buzzed louder, a swarm of judgment circling him, blending with the plane's steady hum. Derek's earlier taunt, that sugary sting about economy's crowd, lingered like a bad taste, priming the passengers for more cruelty. The air crackled with tension, the stage set for a bigger showdown as Statham's secret simmered, a spark waiting to ignite the cabin's smug world. Derek's fake smile twisted into a smug grin as he pointed at Jason Statham, his voice cutting through the first-class cabin like a slick dagger wrapped in silk. "Oh, my dear sir, that bargain bin mask and cap are such a quaint choice," he purred, his tone oozing with polished venom. "But surely economy's humble seats would better showcase your unique flair?" The veiled insult, sharp and cruel beneath its sugary coating, exploded across the cabin, branding Statham's disguise a disgrace to the elite crowd's pristine world. Passengers snapped to attention, their eyes locking onto the man in the window seat, his plain black mask and battered baseball cap now a target for their scorn. Statham, slouched low, kept his nerve, the mask and cap shielding his famous face from the growing storm. "I'm fine right here," he said, his voice low and steady, a quiet anchor against the rising tide of mockery. But Derek, sensing weakness, strutted closer, his eyes gleaming with cruel delight. "Goodness, sir, your thrift store style is quite the spectacle," he chirped, his voice loud enough to echo off the cabin's plush walls. "But first class is for refinement, not coach rejects like you." The words were a public gut punch, shredding Statham's unassuming hoodie and cap as an offense to the cabin's grandeur. Laughter erupted, the passengers' amusement a wildfire, fed by Derek's artful savagery, their smug faces glowing with the thrill of tearing down a nobody. The crowd, egged on by Derek's performance, piled on with their own vicious jabs, each one sharper than the last. "That cheap mask and cap are an insult to our cabin," a businessman in a tailored suit sneered, his voice thick with arrogance, sparking a wave of snickers from nearby seats. A woman with a glittering hairpin leaned forward, her tone dripping with fake pity. "Oh, darling, your discount looks dragging down our first-class shine. Do us a favor and vanish," she cooed, her words a velvet blade slicing through the air. Another passenger, his silk tie glinting, hissed to his seatmate, "Bet he's hiding a face only a back alley would claim." The taunts flew like arrows, each one aimed at Statham's shrouded face and scruffy cap, their smug glee surging as they reveled in humiliating the man they saw as beneath them. Statham's knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of his cap, his jaw clenched tight beneath the mask, the sting of their words searing like a brand. Hold it together, he thought, his mind a fortress against the crushing weight of their scorn, each mocking jab testing his resolve to keep his identity hidden. His silence, meant to protect his secret, only fueled the crowd's cruelty, their voices swelling into a vicious storm that filled the gilded cabin. Derek circled back, his smirk wider, his posture that of a showman milking the crowd's laughter. "Surely, sir, you'd feel more at home among economy's less discerning crowd," he trilled, his faux courtesy a whip cracking over the passengers' roaring approval, the cabin now a cauldron of relentless derision. The air crackled with raw contempt, the passengers' whispers turning into a barrage of open jeers, each one more cutting than the last. "Get that ratty cap out of here," a man in a sleek blazer barked, his voice booming with self-righteous disdain. "Your mask's a joke. First class deserves better." A woman with pearl earrings scoffed, her tone coated in mock concern, as if Statham's presence was a personal affront to her status. The crowd's laughter grew louder, a tidal wave of ridicule drowning out the faint hum of the intercom, the captain's routine announcement lost in the chaos of their scorn. Statham's hands twitched, his fingers brushing the mask's edge, a flicker of defiance in his eyes as the humiliation bore down, threatening to crack his carefully guarded anonymity. Derek, emboldened by the cabin's frenzy, leaned in one last time, his voice a sing-song taunt that carried the weight of final judgment. "Come now, sir, spare us the embarrassment of your budget ensemble," he said, gesturing grandly at Statham's mask and cap. "Economy's waiting to embrace your kind." The passengers roared, their laughter a vicious crescendo, some clapping as if Derek had delivered a winning performance. Statham's breath steadied, but his shoulders tensed, the pain of their words a fire raging beneath his calm exterior. "Not yet," he thought, his resolve a thin thread holding back the truth that could flip this cabin upside down. The storm of mockery showed no sign of slowing, the passengers' smug faces alight with the thrill of their cruelty, unaware of the reckoning simmering beneath Statham's disguise. The first-class cabin crackled with vicious glee, the passengers' whispers sharpening into a storm of elitist scorn that rained down on Jason Statham. "His budget mask and cap are tarnishing our cabin's prestige," a businessman in a gleaming suit hissed, his voice a venomous whisper that sparked smirks across the aisle. A woman with sapphire earrings leaned forward, her tone slick with mock sympathy. "Oh dear, that shoddy disguise is simply unfit for our refined company," she purred, her words a polished blade slicing at Statham's plain hoodie and battered cap. Another passenger, his cufflinks flashing, scoffed, "Looks like he raided a thrift shop to crash first class." Their taunts, dripping with smug superiority, painted Statham's unassuming look as a crime against the cabin's luxury, each jab fueling the crowd's cruel delight. Derek, feeding off the passengers' frenzy, strutted back to Statham's seat, his fake smile a mask of its own, twisted with sadistic glee. "Kindly unmask for our comfort, sir, or shall we escort you to economy's more fitting ambience?" he cooed, his voice a sugary lash, the veiled threat of security cutting through the cabin's roar. The words were a public execution, humiliating Statham's disguise as an insult to the elite crowd, his mask and cap now a bullseye for their ridicule. The passengers cheered, their laughter a tidal wave, some nodding as if Derek were a hero defending their precious status. Statham sat rigid, the cabin's eyes burning into him, his plain black mask and worn cap a target for their relentless scorn. "Keep it locked down," he thought, his mind a steel cage against the searing humiliation, each taunt a hammer strike to his resolve. His fingers dug into the cap's brim, knuckles paling, as the weight of their judgment pressed like a vice. The sting of being branded a nobody scorched deep, but he held his secret tight, his silence a shield that only stoked the crowd's venom. Every whisper, every smirk felt like a spotlight, stripping away the anonymity he'd fought to keep. A sharp crackle from the crew radio pierced the din, a voice barking, "Need backup in first class, possible trouble." The ominous call, muffled but clear, sent a jolt through the cabin, passengers exchanging glances, their jeers faltering for a split second. Derek's smirk widened, his hand hovering near his radio, as if ready to summon security to drag the masked stranger away. The stakes skyrocketed, the cabin's air thick with tension, as Statham's hidden identity teetered on the edge of exposure, the crowd's cruel laughter a fuse burning toward a reckoning. The first-class cabin pulsed with vicious glee, Derek smirk a wicked crescent as he loomed over Jason Statham's seat, his voice a syrupy blade slashing through the charged air. "Dear sir, kindly unmask and spare our esteemed guests your budget charm, or shall economy welcome you with open arms?" he trilled, his tone dripping with polished cruelty, each word a public flogging of Statham's plain black mask and battered baseball cap. His hand hovered over his radio, a silent threat of security, as the passengers' laughter roared, their scorn a wildfire scorching the man they deemed a nobody. "Oh, please, reveal yourself," a woman with sapphire earrings mocked, her voice a venomous coo. "First class deserves better than your thrift shop act," a businessman in a silk suit jeered, fueling the crowd's savage delight. Statham sat rigid, the cabin's eyes a crushing weight, his mask and cap a bullseye for their relentless ridicule. Time to end this, he thought, the searing humiliation a furnace in his chest, each taunt a spark threatening to ignite his carefully guarded secret. His fingers tightened on the cap's brim, knuckles pale, as his breath steadied, a flicker of defiance breaking through the shame. "Enough," he said, his voice a low growl, cutting through the din like a gunshot. With deliberate calm, he tugged off the cap, tossing it onto the seat, and peeled away the mask, revealing the chiseled, unmistakable face of Jason Statham. The cabin froze, the air sucked out in a collective gasp, as his piercing eyes met the stunned crowd, his iconic scowl silencing their mockery in an instant. Shock rippled through the passengers, their smug faces crumbling into disbelief. "That's Jason Statham," the businessman choked, his coffee cup trembling, his earlier sneer now a mask of horror. "We're such fools," the woman with earrings gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her voice a mix of awe and regret. Another passenger, his cufflinks glinting, stammered, "No way, it's really him." The cabin erupted in frantic whispers, their cruel taunts replaced by a hum of astonishment, some fumbling for their phones, others sinking into their seats, faces flushed with the sting of their blunder. The laughter that had fueled their scorn vanished, leaving a stunned silence that vibrated with the weight of their misjudgment. Derek's smirk vanished, his face draining to a sickly red as he stumbled back, his radio slipping from his shaking hand. I didn't know," he stammered, his voice cracking, the polished cruelty of moments ago now a pitiful squeak. "Sir, I thought, you looked—" His words tripped over themselves, drowned by the cabin's buzz. His authority shattered as the passenger's eyes darted between him and Statham. A crew member, catching the chaos, whispered urgently into her radio, and moments later, the captain's voice boomed over the intercom, crisp and authoritative. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're honored to have Mr. Jason Statham aboard. Please respect his privacy." The announcement landed like a thunderclap, confirming Derek's catastrophic error, the cabin's collective gasp morphing into a wave of murmurs, some passengers nodding in sheepish respect, others whispering apologies to the air. Statham stood, his presence commanding, the mask and cap now relics of a disguise that had sparked this firestorm. "Judge less next time," he said, his voice calm but edged with steel, his words a quiet rebuke that pierced the cabin's stunned silence. Derek's head bowed, his stammered apologies fading into the hum of the plane, as the passengers all washed over the scene, their earlier scorn a bitter memory. The cabin's gilded air, once thick with contempt, now buzzed with a new energy, respect, tinged with the sting of their own folly, as Statham's reveal turned their cruel game into a lesson they'd never forget. The first-class cabin buzzed with stunned awe, Jason Statham's unmasked face a bombshell that shattered the passengers' smug world. His chiseled jaw and piercing eyes, now bare after tossing aside his plain black mask and battered baseball cap, held the room captive, his presence a thunderclap silencing the echoes of their cruel laughter. Derek's flushed face froze, his earlier swagger obliterated, as Statham's voice cut through the electric air, steady and sharp like a blade. "You trashed a mask and cap, not my worth," he said, each word a sledgehammer to the cabin's arrogance. "Check your ego before you shame a man." The quotable rebuke landed like wildfire, scorching the crowd's pride, their gasps a chorus of shock as Statham stood tall, his faded gray hoodie no longer a mark of shame but a badge of quiet strength. Derek's world imploded, his polished facade cracking as he stumbled back, his radio clattering to the floor. "A simple error, sir, surely you understand," he stammered, his voice a shaky mix of panic and faux courtesy, clinging to the last shreds of his dignity. But the passengers' mutters drowned him, their earlier jeers twisting into a new verdict. "He's finished," a businessman in a sleek suit hissed, his face pale, his earlier scorn now a bitter pill. "What a clown!" a woman with pearl earrings scoffed, her voice sharp with self-loathing, as the crowd's whispers swirled, a mix of awe and regret. Derek's eyes darted wildly, his fake smile gone, his stammered pleas. "I didn't mean, it was a mistake." Lost in the cabin's shifting tide, his ego shredded under Statham's unflinching gaze. Statham stepped forward, his presence a storm cloud, his voice dropping to a low, biting edge. "First class buys seats, not respect," he said, his words a sizzling brand searing Derek's arrogance. "Judge smarter, or you'll crash harder." The moral stung like a whip, slicing through the cabin's gilded air, each syllable a lesson etched in the passengers' stunned silence. The crowd leaned in, their faces a kaleidoscope of shame and admiration, the man they'd branded a nobody now a towering figure of dignity. A man with a glinting watch whispered, "He's right, we're the fools," his voice barely audible, while another passenger, her hairpin glinting, nodded, muttering, "Never saw that coming." The cabin's energy surged, respect rising like a tidal wave, washing away the venom of their earlier taunts. The passengers' voices broke through, a chaotic mix of apologies and awe that electrified the scene. "We're such idiots," a businessman groaned, his head bowed, his earlier jeer a haunting echo. "Sorry, mate, you're a legend," a woman in a silk scarf called, her tone earnest, her face flushed with regret. Another passenger, his tie askew, blurted, "We didn't know, total respect." The apologies crashed like waves, each one a step toward redemption, as Derek stood frozen, his head low, his earlier cruelty a noose tightening around him. The captain's voice, still lingering from the intercom's earlier announcement, seemed to echo in the silence, a final nail in Derek's blunder, as the cabin transformed into a stage for Statham's quiet triumph. His spiced-up rebuke a spark that lit the crowd's newfound humility. The first-class cabin thrummed with electric reverence, Jason Statham's unmasked presence a blazing beacon that turned the passengers' scorn to ash. His chiseled features, freed from the plain black mask and battered baseball cap, commanded the room, his steely gaze a silent rebuke to the crowd's earlier cruelty. Derek stood frozen, his pride a smoldering wreck, as Statham's voice rolled out, calm but packed with grit. "Errors burn, but growth heals," he said, each word a lightning strike of wisdom. "You mocked a mask and cap, not a man. Choose wisely next time." The quotable line scorched the air, a lifeline tossed to Derek, offering a shot at redemption while searing the cabin's arrogance with its truth. Passengers leaned forward, their faces a mix of shame and awe, hooked by the action star's quiet power. Derek's shoulders slumped, his earlier swagger buried under a tidal wave of regret. "I got it all wrong, sir. Never again," he choked out, his voice raw, a shaky blend of genuine sorrow and lingering embarrassment that cracked his polished facade. His eyes darted to the floor, unable to meet Statham's steady gaze, as the weight of his blunder crushed him. The passengers' whispers surged, no longer venomous but alive with respect. "He's toast, but Statham's class," a businessman in a crisp suit muttered, his earlier jeer now a ghost haunting his flushed face. "We're morons for trashing his style," a woman with sapphire earrings groaned, her voice thick with regret, her hairpin glinting as she shook her head. Another man, his watch flashing, leaned toward his seatmate, whispering, "Total respect, he's the real deal." The cabin buzzed with their voices, a chaotic symphony of apologies that drowned out Derek's faltering plea, each word a scramble to shed their guilt and align with Statham's dignity. Statham's nod was subtle, a king acknowledging a humbled court. His faded gray hoodie a stark contrast to the cabin's glitz yet radiating more presence than their flashy suits. "Respect ain't bought with a ticket," he added, his voice a low growl that hit like a thunderclap. "See the man, not the cover." The moral blazed through the cabin, a torch igniting a shift from scorn to reverence, each syllable hooking the crowd's attention like a cliffhanger. The passengers' faces lit up, some scribbling notes, others whispering in awe, their earlier cruelty a bitter lesson now etched in their minds. A woman in a silk scarf called out, "We were blind, sorry, you're a legend," her tone earnest, her eyes wide. "Huge respect for handling that," a man with a loose tie shouted, his voice raw, as the crowd's energy spiked, their apologies a roaring wave that kept every listener glued to the unfolding drama. The cabin transformed into a stage for Statham's triumph, Derek's head still bowed, his regret a heavy chain as the passengers' voices swirled around him. "We judged a disguise, not a hero," a passenger blurted, his cufflinks glinting as he clapped, sparking a ripple of nods and murmurs. The air crackled with a new vibe, respect, raw and electric, surging like a storm that held the crowd captive, their eyes locked on Statham, the man who'd flipped their world with a single reveal. His quiet strength, unyielding against their taunts, was a hook that sank deep, keeping every ear pinned to the story's pulse, the lesson of humility a fire that burned bright, promising to linger long after the flight touched down. The first-class cabin blazed with electric awe, Jason Statham's towering presence a supernova that turned the passengers' bitter scorn into a wildfire of respect. His unmasked face, freed from the plain black mask and battered baseball cap, radiated grit, his steely eyes locking the crowd in a spell as their earlier cruelty dissolved like ash in the wind. With a sly grin, Statham leaned forward, his voice a gravelly spark that lit up the room. "Once hid in a fake beard on a film set, trust me, this mask and cap were less trouble," he quipped, the punchy anecdote landing like a thunderbolt, sparking a firestorm of laughs that melted the cabin's tension. The passengers roared, their faces alight, hooked by the action star's effortless charm, the air crackling with a newfound connection that kept every ear glued to the drama. The crowd, their smug facades shattered, surged forward, their voices a vibrant chorus of awe and curiosity, each question a bridge to the man they'd wronged. "How do you stay so calm under attack like that?" a businessman in a crisp suit asked, his voice raw with admiration, his earlier jeer a ghost of shame. "Ever deal with jerks like us in Hollywood?" a woman with sapphire earrings blurted, her tone eager, her hairpin glinting as she leaned closer, her eyes wide with wonder. A man with a shiny watch, his tie loose, called out, Got any tricks for handling pressure? His question sparking nods from others, their elite personas now humbled by Statham's grace. The cabin ignited with their chatter, a pulsating wave of connection that replaced their venom with reverence, each word a hook sinking deep into the listener's attention, pulling them toward the story's heart. Statham's grin widened, his faded gray hoodie a stark contrast to the cabin's glitz, yet his quiet strength made him the undisputed hero. Pressure's just noise. Tune it out, he said, his voice a low rumble that hit like a lightning strike. His words a quotable gem that had passengers scribbling notes, their faces glowing with inspiration. A woman in a silk scarf gasped, "Your grace outshines your films," her voice trembling with awe, while a man with cufflinks shouted, "You're a class act, mate. We were dead wrong." The crowd's reactions exploded like fireworks, each one a vivid burst of apology and admiration, their earlier taunts a bitter lesson now fueling their fervor. Derek, humbled to a shadow, moved quietly in the background, serving coffee with a bowed head, his earlier arrogance a distant echo as he soaked in Statham's lesson, his redemption a silent thread weaving through the cabin's roar. The scene pulsed with raw energy, the passengers' voices a symphony of respect that kept the narrative racing, every moment a hook to hold viewers tight. "We misjudged a legend," a passenger blurted, his watch flashing as he clapped, sparking a ripple of fervent nods. "You've got our respect forever," another called, her earrings swaying as she beamed, the cabin alive with a storm of connection that refused to let go. Statham's nod, cool and commanding, sealed the turnaround, his spiced-up charm a blazing spotlight that turned the cabin into a stage for his triumph. The listeners locked in, breathless, as the story charged toward its peak. The first-class cabin pulsed with raw reverence, Jason Statham's towering presence a blazing torch that turned the passengers' venom into a storm of humbled awe. His unmasked face, stripped of the plain black mask and battered baseball cap, glowed with quiet strength, his steely eyes pinning the crowd as their earlier cruelty crumbled to dust. With a steady nod, he leaned forward, his voice a gravelly thunderbolt that seized every ear. "A mask and cap hide a face, not a soul," he said, each word a razor-sharp gem. "See deeper before you judge." The quotable line ignited the cabin like a flare, a searing call to humility that hooked listeners, their gasps a chorus of stunned respect as Statham's dignity reshaped their smug world. Turning to the crowd, he dropped his voice to a low, piercing growl, his words a final electrifying strike. "Respect costs nothing. Spend it freely," he urged, the moral a lightning bolt that cracked through the cabin's gilded air, demanding they rethink their snap judgments. The passengers froze, their faces a tapestry of regret and resolve, the man they'd scorned now a beacon whose lesson burned bright. A businessman in a crisp suit whispered, "He's right, we're blind," his voice raw, while a woman with sapphire earrings nodded, muttering, "That hits hard." The cabin buzzed with fervent whispers, their elite masks shattered, each word a hook that yanked viewers deeper into the story's grip, the tension crackling like a live wire. Statham adjusted his faded gray hoodie, pocketing the mask with a cool, "Time to land," his exit line a quiet detonation that left the cabin reeling. He strode toward the aisle, his every step a pulse of authority, as passengers leaned forward, their eyes wide with awe, some scribbling his words, others nodding in silent vow. "We'll never judge like that again," a man with a shiny watch declared, his voice fervent, sparking a ripple of agreement. "He's a legend in every way," a woman in a silk scarf gasped, her eyes gleaming, the crowd's reactions a vibrant surge that kept listeners locked in, breathless for the tale's close. Derek, his pride a smoldering ruin, lingered in the shadows, his humbled gaze fixed on Statham, a silent pledge to carry the lesson forward. The narrator's voice rose, sharp and vivid, weaving a reflection that soared beyond the cabin's walls. Statham's dignity had flipped a battlefield of scorn into a crucible of change, the passengers' hearts reshaped by a truth that hit like a thunderclap: judge the deed, not the disguise. Derek's shame, once afire, now fueled a vow to see clearer, while the crowd's newfound humility rippled outward, a spark that could light up countless lives. The cabin, once a cage of arrogance, stood transformed, its pulse a testament to one man's quiet power, a story that gripped viewers tight, leaving them hungry for the final echo of Statham's triumph.